Everything from soup to nuts, folks. Come and get it.
Hello, and welcome one and all to episode 16 of the Laurel and Hardy blogcast, the podcast that explores every film that Stan Laurel and Oliver Hardy made together. As usual, I'm Patrick Vasey, the author of the Laurel and Hardy blog, and your host for the next hour or so. On the show today, our film in focus is the 1928 silent short From Soup to Nuts. And joining me to discuss this classic picture, we are blessed to welcome back Laurel and Hardy historian, expert and author, and the legend that is Randy Skretvedt. Randy was of course with us on the previous episode where we discussed the finishing touch, but I've asked him back today as I wanted, as part of the discussion of From Soup to Nuts, to also talk about one of its notable supporting players, the wonderful Anita Garvin. Now, Randy was lucky enough to be friends with Anita and interviewed her many times, and I couldn't think of anybody better placed to speak about her than Randy, so stay tuned for all of that. Now, it's really great to see so many meetings of Sons of the Desert tents being held once again after such a long and enforced break. So I was just thinking, if you belong to a tent and you'd like to give a shout out to your fellow members on a future show, and also highlight the fact that you're meeting again and maybe attract some new members, then do feel free to drop me a line, or even better, you can drop me an MP3 sound file of your message, and I'd love to help you spread the good word. You can email me at laurelandhardyblog@gmail.com.
Remember, united we stand. Divided we fall.
So, let's jump right in and let's get this episode underway. From Soup to Nuts was filmed December 27th, 1927 to January 5th, 1928. It was released on March the 24th, 1928. Produced by Hal Roach, directed by Edgar Kennedy, photographed by Len Powers, titles by H.M. Walker. The main cast: Stan Laurel, Oliver Hardy, Anita Garvin, Tiny Sanford, Edna Marion, Dorothy Coburn. Just 2 days after Christmas 1927, Stan and Babe were back at work on a studio stage and in front of the cameras. In response to their growing success, delivering Laurel and Hardy products to the movie-going public was now a priority for the Roach studio. Just as soon as one picture wrapped, work immediately began on the next. The Stan and Ollie characters clearly became more defined with each film, and in this latest picture, From Soup to Nuts, it's evident that Babe Hardy was very close to perfecting his. Here we see Ollie's graceful walk, the panache with which he performs the most mundane of tasks, and his sense of superiority over Stan. It's clear from the outset that Ollie sees himself as the one in charge, stopping Stan from ringing the doorbell as he believes that he himself should be the one to attend to the important things. This blinkered pomposity would be a key feature in the boys' relationship going forward and ensured Ollie is regularly the one on the receiving end of the majority of the team's mishaps. Stan, on the other hand, while showing many of what we might call definitive Stanley traits in this film, still has bouts of volatile behaviour reminiscent of his earlier solo appearances. In one particular scene, we see Stan actually scolding Ollie for falling into a cake, and then sending him out of the room as an angry parent might berate a naughty child. He then turns to the dinner guests and bellows at them all to sit down and carry on eating. Although this is very enjoyable to watch, it is, from our informed 21st century viewpoint at least, not what we now expect from our slow-thinking and passive Stanley. Unquestionably, however, the most important development contained within the two reels of From Soup to Nuts is one that gives the film a vital place in Laurel and Hardy's history. During the filming of this picture, a crucially important facet of the team's comedy was stumbled upon, almost accidentally, by the man already credited for teaming Stan and Babe in the first place, Leo McCarey. This key piece of the jigsaw would prove vital for the act's longevity and, as it later transpired, would be a contributing factor in making them uniquely prepared for the approaching transition to talkies. Some of Babe Hardy's most memorable contributions to this film are his pratfalls into gigantic sloppy cakes. There are 3 in total, the last of which is the very final scene when Mrs. Culpepper smacks Ollie up the face and sends him careering into the cake trolley. It was during the filming of these particular sequences that the penny dropped for McCarey, as Wes D. Gehring records in his book Leo McCary From Marx to McCarthy. Quote, Leo the raconteur later related the incident in his amusingly earthy style. I came in one morning and said, "We're all working too fast. We've got to get away from these jerky movements and work at a normal speed." I said, "I'll give you an example of what I mean. There's a royal dinner. All the royalty is seated around the table and somebody lets out a fart. Now everybody exchanges a glance. That's all. Everybody died laughing, but I got my point over." He then applied the concept to a particular scene in From Soup to Nuts where Stan and Ollie are hired waiters at a society dinner. Hardy is about to serve a cake but trips and falls headfirst into said cake. McCary shouted, "Don't move! Above all, don't move! Stay like that! The cake should burn your face!" Thus a new form of comedy, slow slapstick, was born. This crucial strategy is a vital ingredient in what makes Laurel and Hardy so special. Slowing the pace right down to a crawl ensured that each gag could be savoured, and in addition, the reactions to the gag could be milked for all they were worth. Hal Roach, in an interview with the BBC, described the process thus. When Hardy fell in the mud puddle, you would cut to his expression of disgust. Then you cut to the bewildered Laurel, looking at Hardy in the puddle. Then back to Hardy. So actually you got 3 laughs, when with a normal comedian you'd only get 1. Another element that contributed to Laurel and Hardy's success is enabling the audience to connect with them. They have an effortless ability to win us over, to disarm us and gain our sympathy, and importantly, make us see a little bit of ourselves within them. It's their struggles against authority and the general perils and pitfalls of everyday life that we, the viewers, understand and empathise with. From Soup to Nuts, the boys' 20th film together, is a prime example of one of those types of situations. We are informed that Stan and Ollie are experienced waiters and have been sent to work at a swanky society event at the home of the nouveau riche Mr. and Mrs. Culpepper, played by Tiny Sanford and Anita Garvin. We're also informed, however, that whilst the boys are indeed experienced waiters, their experience has been gained working in railroad eating houses. Despite the fact that they are completely out of their depth, they press on, undeterred, to do the best job they can. Completely unprepared, unequipped, and quite simply out of their depth, one has to admire their visible and complete belief in themselves and their abilities. Not for a moment does the possibility of failure or humiliation cross their minds. They've been set a task and they're going to perform that task with grace and dignity, and in the end, they'll be successful. Now, we all know, of course, that they're going to fail, and not only that, it's going to be on an epic scale. And it's this kind of juxtaposition that makes us fall in love with these characters again and again, film after film. We love them for their naive innocence and their unfaltering confidence and belief in themselves and in each other. They will try, they will fail, and they will fall, but they will always get up, dust themselves off, and start all over again. For the 3rd film in a row, the boys are teams with Edgar Kennedy. In the previous 2 films, Leave 'Em Laughing and The Finishing Touch, Kennedy plays a cop constantly frustrated with the dim-witted stupidity of Stan and Ollie. Then, to add a level of humiliation into the bargain, he ends up being either knocked black and blue, being soaked from head to toe, or covered in something very sticky and basically reduced to tears. So for his involvement with From Soup to Nuts, it's perhaps no surprise that he chose to take up a position behind the cameras and well out of harm's way. This picture was Edgar Kennedy's first of 2 back-to-back attempts at directing Laurel and Hardy comedies, and it has to be said, he made a pretty good fist of it. The film takes place solely at the Culpeppers' dinner party and makes the most of the boys' ability to generate maximum comedy out of a very simple situation. There are numerous quality moments during this picture, and as a result, it was selected by filmmaker Robert Youngson for heavy sampling in his 1965 compilation movie, Laurel and Hardy's Laughing Twenties. From Soup to Nuts is arguably most well known for Anita Garvin's scene where she's pitted, no pun intended, against a worthy adversary, a fruit cocktail. This gag is a reworking of an identical one performed by Stan only a few films and months earlier in the second 100 years. After awkwardly deciding which piece of cutlery to use, Anita ends up chasing a cherry around and out of her fruit bowl with a spoon, and as soon as she finally succeeds in getting it to her lips, her tiara slips from her forehead, covering her eyes and making her drop the fruit. Garvin's performance here is excellent, as is her timing with the falling tiara. This sequence would be dusted off and used for a third and final time in A Chump at Oxford in 1938. The entire dinner party sequence, including Stan and Ollie, cast as last-minute stand-in waiters who succeed in ruining a dinner party, was remade as the first reel of the later feature. The main difference in A Chump at Oxford, however, is that Stan returns to his cross-dressing guise as Agnes the maid, a la Duck Soup and Another Fine Mess. From Soup to Nuts is another picture that does not build up to a huge reciprocal destruction finale. Instead, the film works its way to a much quieter climax. Stan is asked by Ollie to bring in the salad undressed, and after some considerable effort to process this request, followed by a number of puzzled expressions, Stan, in his naive innocence, strips down and proceeds to serve the salad in his underwear. When he is eventually spotted, Ollie attempts to hide his friend, but Mrs. Culpepper has also clocked him, and she is furious. The film closes with Ollie getting slapped in the face by Mrs. Culpepper, and, adhering to the rule of 3, see the previous blog on the finishing touch, he is sent hurtling face first into a massive cake for the 3rd time in the film. The Roach Studio was now turning out and promoting Laurel and Hardy comedies at a rapid rate, and primarily due to the consistently high quality of their pictures, the boys' reputation was growing stronger and stronger. Understandably, theatre owners and operators couldn't get enough as their audiences lapped them up, as these contemporary reviews from various editions of Exhibitors Herald and Moving Picture World ably illustrate. Another good one from this team. Gee, we're glad we bought Metro for 1929. Film condition just a trifle under Metro par, but when the audience roars, we only whisper such things. That was Screenland Theatre, Nevada. From the Lyric Theatre, Loudon, Tennessee, MGM sure has the comedies this year. This one is a real comedy. Kept my crowd laughing from start to finish. Boys, if you haven't got these comedies, get them quick, and you can't go wrong. From the Rex Theatre, Salmon, Idaho, kept house in uproar. Slapstick stuff, which went over good. Metro has the comedies. Overall, the film's concept is simple. The execution from all the players is outstanding, and it all adds up to an enjoyable 20 minutes or so. It's perhaps fitting, therefore, to leave the last word to Stephen J. Brenner from the New Eagle Theatre, Baltimore, Maryland, reviewing the picture in Exhibitors Herald World, October 27th, 1928. Quote, Laurel Hardy. Without a doubt, this is the best team of laughter producers this screen has ever had. If your patrons don't laugh at this comedy, they better consult their very best doctor. Our special guest today is a voice that will be becoming very familiar to all of you by now, and we are blessed to have had him on the blogcast so often. Not only is he a font of knowledge on all things Laurel and Hardy, but he is also a joy to talk to and to listen to. So without further ado, let's welcome back Randy Skretvedt. Welcome back, Randy.
Thank you. And well, I hope I'm a joy to listen to, because I'm certainly aware of the fact that I do go on. So
that's why we like having you on.
I hope I don't annoy people with my lengthy answers, but I will preface this by saying that you don't get short answers with me, because everything that I say happens to spark something else that I remember about the film. So I have to divulge that too while I'm thinking about it. So that's just how these things work.
That's why we love having you on, Randy. We don't want short answers. Thank you very much.
Good.
So, yeah, From Soup to Nuts is today's film, and really, really excited again to discuss this one, especially, and this is why I've asked you to come back again so soon, Randy, is because I wanted to talk a little bit about Anita Garvin, if we can. And I know you were friends with Anita for a number of years, so who better than to talk about the lovely Miss Garvin? So. If we make a start, I guess if we sort of talk about the film and then maybe come into talking about Anita towards the end, and then we can dedicate the sort of the second half of the discussion, if that's okay.
Okay.
Edgar Kennedy behind the camera. on this one.
Yes, well, as I mentioned in our previous discussion about The Finishing Touch, Edgar of late had been in a couple of Laurel and Hardy films where he suffered quite a bit of physical abuse, I guess you would say, in the service of his art, because in Finishing Touch, he has a lot of glue on him and shingles from a roof and takes a number of falls. And prior to that, in Leave 'Em Laughing, why he's standing out there in the middle of Main Street of Culver City with his trousers down and in full view of several motorists and no doubt several authentic Culver City citizens. So it's probably no surprise that he might have asked to be only behind the camera for From Soup to Nuts and the subsequent film, which is You're Darn Tootin'. Both of which are highly capably directed. It almost makes you wish that he had directed more films with Laurel and Hardy than just those two. But these were not his maiden efforts as a director. There was a period of his career in the mid-20s where he was directing more so than acting. And, he goes back to the early Senate days as an actor. But then there was a period in the 20s where he was directing as well, or directing primarily. And so maybe it was a nice return for him to be in the role of the director rather than acting. But and for some reason, I always read as a kid that he was credited as E. Livingston Kennedy, and the main titles which have surfaced don't seem to bear that out. He's billed as Edgar Kennedy, so where E. Livingston came from, I don't know. In fact, I don't even know if Livingston was actually his middle name. I'll have to go back and look at that, or ask Bill Cassara. Do you know Bill Cassara?
We had Bill Cassara on about 2 episodes ago. Yes.
Okay, yeah. Good. Because he is the expert on Edgar Kennedy, and of course, great guy. He would have been a good guy to do this episode too. So maybe you talked about that with him. I don't know, but
we covered quite a bit. It was the episode we did was just focused on Edgar Kennedy. It was a little special.
Oh, good.
Like a little
bonus episode. Good. Yeah, good, because he was a multi-talented guy. And talk about somebody who died with his boots on. He was working right up until the time of his death. He died of throat cancer, but doesn't seem to have had any particular marked effect on him being able to work. He looks a little bit frail in, was it Unfaithfully Yours, the Preston Sturges picture? But he has a brilliant scene in that. I don't know if you've seen that movie. It's one of his last, but he has a wonderful. Preston Sturges gave him a lot of wonderful scenes in that. And his very last movie is a film called My Dream Is Yours, a Doris Day picture, and also one of his few in color. He's also in the original A Star Is Born, which is in color. But he's quite prominent in that, and that's his very last film. And he was also making the Average Man two-reel comedies at RKO right up until the end, right through 1948. So, he was only 58 when he died. Which absolutely amazes me that I'm 62 and I'm 4 years older than Edgar Kennedy got to be. And I still have my hair, which I fully did not anticipate, I guarantee you, when I was a teenager, because my genetic forebears on both sides of my family were much more like Edgar Kennedy in the realm of having hair. But anyway, the short story is that he was a capable director, and it's proven by his work on From Soup to Nuts, which is a very, very well made, a very well crafted comedy.
Yes, absolutely. And Len Powers was the cameraman instead of George Stevens, I believe, as well.
Well, yeah, there were several cameramen at that time. Art Lloyd was also working there, even though he wasn't working much with Laurel and Hardy at the time. Right. There's also a first assistant cameraman who was John McBurney. And I think he might be one of the ones, I can't remember, he might be one of the 4 guys who's credited on Unaccustomed As We Are, which is a strange credit, because there's 4 cameramen credited on that one.
Oh, right. Okay.
And you kind of go, well, were they trying to do a 3-camera setup like I Love Lucy later perfected, trying to do everything all at once with 3 angles shot at the same time? I don't know. But anyway, they did rotate from time to time. Lloyd French was the assistant director on this, and of course he subsequently became a director for Laurel and Hardy. He directed Busybodies and a couple of others, and only lived to be 50 years old. But he was the son of Louis Alver French, who was the business manager for the Hal Roach Studios.
Oh, right, okay.
L.A. French. Everybody around the lot called him Los Angeles French. That's Lloyd French's dad. And
Right.
Hal Roach knew Louis Alver French from the days when Hal Roach was a truck driver, because L.A. French was the business manager for the company that Hal Roach was working for as a truck driver. And Hal Roach told him, if I ever get my own company, I want you to be the guy to run the business end of it. Well, brilliant. Hal made good on his promise. As he also did for Leo McCarey. Leo McCarey was working at Universal with Todd Browning, who later renowned then as a horror director. And they were both members of the Los Angeles Athletic Club, which is still standing. And Hal Roach said, every time I see you, you make me laugh. Because Leo McCarey had an Irish sense of humor, and he was always cracking jokes. And Hal Roach said, I make my living making people laugh. And if you ever lose your job, you come and see me, because I'll bet you can help me make people laugh. Well, sure enough, Leo lost his job at Universal and came to see Hal Roach. And Hal Roach said, come on over, and did an apprenticeship with Charlie Chase for a few years. When Chase died, Leo McCarey said, everything I know about directing a movie, I owe to Charlie Chase, because he taught me everything I know.
Oh, wow.
So that's pretty high praise. And then after a while, F. Richard Jones, who had been the supervising director of everything at the studio, left. He left to go make a Douglas Fairbanks picture called The Gaucho. And he took Lupe Velez with him, who was then a starlet at the Hal Roach Studios. So that's how Leo McCarey then became the supervising director at this point of everything, which he remained until the time of Big Business. He quit right after Big Business because he got an offer to direct features at Pathé. But anyway, so McCarey was involved in this film, and Lloyd French, both Laurel and Hardy directors, as well as Edgar Kennedy. And so a lot of talented people, even though George Stevens didn't happen to be on this one.
No. And it's funny you should say, because when I was watching it, there's a couple of tracking shots that I just thought, that's got to be George Stevens, because he likes a bit of a tracking shot.
They're a little bit bumpy, too.
Yes, very bumpy.
The one where we're following Edna Marion all the way through the dining hall up to the front door. There's a couple of little hiccups there. And I thought, well, what are they rolling on? Because this is such a long tracking shot. It's almost too long, because you would see the track that would normally be there for the camera to roll on. Even though silent movie cameras were very lightweight and portable, and that's why they're so fluid and can go anywhere. But still, they do have their little inconsistencies like that. I mean, that was a problem that was really not solved until the 1970s. Because I remember I was a film student in 1976 when Rocky came out, and there's a famous shot of Rocky as he's doing his training. He runs up the steps of the Philadelphia Library. And the camera follows him, and it's absolutely as smooth as can be. And all of us who were film students looked at that shot, and we all went, how did they get that? Because that was impossible. You couldn't go up steps with a camera, a 35 millimeter camera, and get a shot. You couldn't get, even with a dolly shot, you couldn't get it to be that. So how did they do that? And our instructor said, well, they have this new thing called a gyrocam. And it has you wear it, basically. You wear the camera, and it's got this gyroscopic thing in it, which keeps the camera level, even though you may be jostling all over the place. And that's how they got the shot. And they evidently use that all. Well, I'm sure that things have evolved a lot since 1976, but that was the new innovation back then. So anyway, they didn't have that in 1927 when they did From Soup to Nuts. They had to have everything on a standard dolly. So they did what they could. There really are not a lot of shots in Laurel and Hardy at all where there's a lot of camera movement. Nor with Buster Keaton. They would much rather just cut and show you a new shot than move within the shot. If they do move within the shot, it's for a very specific reason. Usually, they're just that just seems to be a hallmark of 1920s silent comedy directing. Is there's not a lot of movement within a shot. It's just if you got to show something new, go to a new shot. And,
I was thinking about, is it in Sugar Daddies when they're going down that, what do they call them, an Astroglide or whatever, the big slide, well, and they're on the slide with them. Of course,
for that you want the motion, and that's what they call an IMO shot. And an IMO was a small handheld camera, but it was 35 millimeter, but it could hold only a very small amount of film. But for special effects shots, it's basically like, like a home movie camera. And you had a guy obviously going in front of them backwards, and say, okay, I'm going backwards now. You guys don't fall into me as I get this shot. And they probably did 3 or 4 of those, but that's how they would do that. There's also what they call IMO shots in with Love and Hisses, where they're all supposed to be naked, skinny dipping. The cameraman had to get into the water with them and shoot that. And, you have to think about that the cameraman basically is part of the cast too many times. He's right there with them.
That's true.
I always think particularly of Liberty, where they're up there on the Anjac Fashion Building, or the Western Costume Company at the time. And, Thomas Benton Roberts said, the poor cameraman had to, get position to shoot all of that stuff. And he had to be very careful about the flagpole that was up there. And you didn't want to fall off there either with your camera, while you're so engrossed in getting the shot. So, yeah. So anyway,
forget about the poor camera.
But anyway, when they do occur, they're rather notable because they are so rare in Laurel and Hardy comedies, shots that have tracking in them or camera movement.
Yeah, certainly leaps out.
Yeah.
Certainly leaps out. And just talking about the tracking shot at the start, we talked last time about this, the set building at the Roche Studios. That set is gorgeous.
It is. It's really, really impressive. And also Sugar Daddies too. I was noticing again recently the hotel interior.
Yes.
And to the point where I remember reading as a kid in William K. Everson's book, The Films of Laurel and Hardy, whenever there would be sets like these, he would say, undoubtedly borrowed from MGM. Well, that's kind of a slap in the face to the Roach people, because no, they had their own scenery doc. If you've ever seen what they call the Sanborn fire insurance maps, they made for Culver. They're in Culver City. If you go to Culver City, you can actually see the hard copy. They're aerial views of everything in Culver City, and they were done for fire insurance purposes. And for historic purposes, they're wonderful because you can see year after year after year, the evolution of the Hal Roach Studios as it got more and more built up, as they built new stages and as new parts of the studio. You see, in fact, online, I think Pete Schroeder from the Netherlands has put up a website where he shows you with color overlays how things grew from year to year to year. I don't know exactly what you Google, but if you just, I would say just Hal Roach Studios and then Pete Schroeder's, Schreuders, that'll probably bring it up for you. But he did it from the Sanborn fire insurance maps. Anyway, it was not a small unit. They had when you see busybodies, when you see all that activity, that's on the Roach lot. That's not location footage. That's where they built sets and props. It was all done in-house. And it's just amazing. The main guy at the time who was in charge of interior set decoration was a guy named Ted Driscoll. And he worked with various other people, but he's one of the uncredited, unsung great people at the Hal Roach Studios. And undoubtedly, they were able to reuse certain elements of sets. For example, in Oliver the Eighth, part of the set there with the staircase is also in Laurel and Hardy Murder Case. So they were able to reuse and redress things. But yeah, that whole from soup to nuts is a very, very ornate interior. And I would imagine if you look at the Battle of the Century, the part where they're having the party for the Frenchmen, any fancy interior like that, it's probably the same set that you're seeing over and over again. Nevertheless, it's very impressive, and particularly for a short comedy. These were not big budget movies. They were probably at that point made for something like $25,000. But as I think I mentioned in the finishing touch, Hal Roach was now being distributed by MGM, which had become in a very short time the the top film company in the world, and they wanted everything, do it big, do it right, give it class was their motto, and especially with emphasis on class. So even if it was a two-reel comedy, they wanted it to look as ornate as an MGM feature picture. And so no doubt there was some MGM money behind those sets, as well as Bank of America, who were the two primary creditors for Hal Roach. But they are rather astonishing when you see those things. And even the kitchen set, part of From Soup to Nuts takes place in the kitchen.
Yeah.
And I was looking at the scene where they first come in, and Ollie is making small talk with the maid, and Stan pushes him and pushes his derby into the cake batter.
That's right, yeah. And
I was saying, look at the tile behind them. Now, see, I'm weird because I look at set direction and things like that. I've talked to other people who say, I didn't notice anything. I say, yeah, but sets are 95% of what you see in the movie. You should, notice them. And especially with Blu-ray now. Blu-ray really brings out all the design and the intricacy of the design in the sets. And you now are able to see a lot of things that we never saw before in prints of movies. But I was just looking at the tile of that, and I was looking, look at this kitchen set. It isn't in the film all that much, but they've got the stove, they've got the work area for auto freeze. And, that alone had to cost a lot of money,
That's very true.
So even though it basically takes place on the one set, it's a heck of a set, every once in a while, there's one that does look kind of low budget, like They Go Boom. Looks like a low budget comedy to me,
Yes.
Because it's pretty much in that bedroom. There are some shots where they go into the kitchen there too, but there's not a lot of production value on They Go Boom. And when I think about that one, I think, well, that's because they wanted to use about half again or 2/3 again as much money for the next picture, which was the Hooskow.
Right.
Because
yes.
the Hooskow is shot entirely on location. And is gorgeous for an early talkie. It's got crane shots and it's got tracking shots. And for an early talkie shot entirely outdoors, it's really impressive. But it had to cost a lot of money. And you figure, well, okay, they have X money per season. They know they're going to make X number of shorts. And so they can say, well, we can use the same money per short, or if we really want to go to town on another short, we can scrimp on this one. And I think that's what happened with They Go Boom and the Hooskow. Boy, I'm going far afield From Soup to Nuts. But anyway,
keep going. I'm cranking.
The end result is that it's a beautiful picture to look at.
Yes.
I wish that the prints that survived on From Soup to Nuts were all so good to properly show it off. In the UK, now I have copies of both the British and the American DVDs, which is primarily what's available on those films now to most people. The British,
is that the Lost films? The Lost films of Laurel and Hardy? Is that the?
Well, yes, that was the American series that was done and released by Image. First on laser discs and also VHS tapes back around 1986, 87, and then subsequently on DVD. And the source material on From Soup to Nuts on that is very much superior, I'm sorry to say, to the British one that's the 21 DVD box set that Universal put out. Because I looked at both of them yesterday, and I thought, dear, because I that was one of the first films I bought on Super 8 from Blackhawk Films in 1968 when I was 9 years old and had just discovered them. And I still have that print, and that looks very good. But that's because at that time, the preprint, it was only a 40-year-old movie at that point.
Yes.
I mean, now we're coming up on close to 100 years. So
the UK version doesn't look good. It doesn't look good at all.
Some preservation or restoration or reclamation work is in view for this, or is needed for this film before it evaporates entirely. But anyway, in its prime, it looks gorgeous, and so which accentuates the comedy. Obviously, if you have these two clumsy waiters who are going to upset things, you want what they're upsetting to be very lovely and ornate.
Yes.
Because it makes it funnier. If they were just working in a crummy old diner who cares?
Yeah.
The fact
Yes, it's that anti-establishment thing, isn't it?
It's an elegant dinner party, and everything is supposed to be just so. And so you have these two guys whose only experiences as waiters is in railroad dining houses, they say in the
That's right.
whatever the letter of apology is to Mrs. Culpepper. We apologize. These two boys were the best we could do on such short notice. They have experience as waiters. Unfortunately, it's only been in railroad dining houses or something. It conveys the idea that watch out.
yeah, absolutely. But the lovely thing is, as well, is how Babe is just he believes he belongs in that environment.
Oh, always.
And the way that he carries himself is just beautiful.
Absolutely, he is to the manner born. When we come to the front door, I must ring the bell. Pardon me. I will represent. It makes you wonder why they're not Hardy and Laurel.
Yeah, well, that's just very true.
In terms of their film relationship, they really should have been.
Yes,
Laurel and Hardy falls on the tongue a little better than Hardy and Laurel does, and of course, the reason it is because Stan Laurel had been a starring comedian, which is Oliver Hardy had only been in sport before, so that's why that is. But maybe Ollie was just being magnanimous because Stan does at one point take his business card. You'll notice there's a part where he's seeing everybody's card there, and he adds theirs, and it says, Laurel and Hardy waiters, all we ask is a chance.
That's right.
I like that. It's so self-effacing,
Yes. Yeah, it's lovely.
Well, aren't I going with you?
I'm afraid not. I'm sorry, but my social position won't permit it.
And a great supporting cast as well. I know we'll talk about Anita Garvin shortly, but we've got Tanya Sanford, Edna Marion, Dorothy Coburn, Eleanor Vanderveer, and Buddy the dog.
Yes,
who I love.
Buddy the dog, whom we will see and hear in Perfect Day.
Yes,
and Buddy will also be associated with Edgar Kennedy again in that film. In fact, at one point in Perfect Day, you hear Edgar say, come on, Buddy, come on. He's trying to quiet the dog because the dog is,
that's right.
Come on, Buddy, come on. So Edgar and Buddy had a long working relationship. And I'm trying to remember now if Buddy was the one who was owned by High East. I think so. Yes. Let's see. Yeah, Henry High East, who was, and it's interesting that they didn't have a dog like this on the Roach lot because they had Tony Campanero, who was the studio animal trainer, and they had a lot of animals because they had them all the time for our gang. But for some reason, they wanted Buddy. He was a special dog, and so Buddy's owner and trainer was Henry East, known as High, and he had special ties to the slapstick comedy community because he was married to Gail Henry. Now, Gail Henry was really the model for Olive Oyl. She was tall and lanky and skinny and kind of gawky looking, and she was a starring comedian in the early 20s. Richard Currier worked with him before working at the Hal Roach lot. Buddy is also in the Charlie Chase comedy Mighty Like a Moose. You can see him prominently in that one. And Henry and Gail, the Easts, had their own 2-acre kennel in Hollywood. And they also owned a wire-haired terrier named Skippy, who became Asta in the MGM Thin Man series. So if you know that series, Asta is very prominent. I imagine there was a succession of Astas over the 16 years that they made those pictures. But in any event, whatever Asta there was would have been courtesy of the same people who gave us Buddy. So,
right.
That was...
And wasn't Buddy in Bacon Grabbers as well? Is he the little dog in Bacon Grabbers that attacks Ollie's braces, as we call them, or suspenders, I think, is it?
Yeah, that's right. There are really 2.5 dogs in Bacon Grabbers, aren't there?
Yeah, that's right.
Interesting. There is the big dog that's supposed to be vicious, which is owned by another Buddy, a young man by the name of Buddy Moore, a 9-year-old boy. That was when I was redoing my Laurel and Hardy book. That was one of my primary objectives, was to identify that boy, because he's prominent in Bacon Grabbers, and the next picture is Angora Love, and he's the one who discovers that the goat is missing.
Oh, right.
And I said,
together.
I got to find that kid. And the gods smiled on me because at USC, there was one special page just for Bacon Grabbers, which identified everybody in the cast. And that's how I was able to find him. and
Brilliant.
subsequently found out his whole biography and everything else. So anyway, there's another Buddy in the Laurel and Hardy world. And yes, I think you're right. I think Buddy may be the dog. I'll have to go back and look at my notes for that. But there's the big dog, the little dog that attacks Ollie's suspenders or braces, and then there's the toy dog that Edgar Kennedy has, which is also in an Our Gang comedy somewhere too. So, so yes, we have a lot of interesting dogs in the world of Laurel and Hardy. There's Laughing Gravy, of course, and Buck the Saint Bernard in Swiss Miss. So.
I do love a nice dog in a film.
Yes, and Dorothy Coburn is also in From Soup to Nuts. Maybe not as prominently as she had been in The Finishing Touch, but speaking of Buddy, she has a nice moment. Maybe she didn't appreciate the moment, but there's a moment where Buddy has the banana in his mouth and he's under the dining room table and he crawls in between Dorothy Coburn's calves, and she thinks that the gentleman. I think it's Tiny Sanford is sitting next to her, and she elbows him and she says, "Be a gentleman." And Tiny, of course, has no idea what she's talking about, but she's feeling this strange sensation underneath her. Yeah, so God only knows what was going on. He was playing footsie with her to some extreme degree or something. There's some odd things in From Soup to Nuts. You wonder why a dog is so attached to bananas. I don't know. I don't know of dogs being particularly fond of banana, or maybe they might even be toxic to dogs. There are certain things, you don't want to feed them onions or chocolate. I don't know if the banana is good for a dog, but he's certainly very adept at placing that banana peel right where it needs to be. And this is also one of the rare instances where Laurel and Hardy, or really anybody, does a slip on the banana peel gag. That's such a cliche about slapstick comedy is, put on the banana peel comedy. Well, this actually has it 3 times, Yeah. And I remember when Richard Bann and I first met Richard Currier, who edited this film. Richard said, was there a house style at the Hal Roach Studios? Was there any sort of studio dictum as to how things should be edited? And he said, well, the only thing was, and he said, it wasn't like anything that came down from Hal. It was just, we just knew it. He says, you always let the audience in on something before you let the characters in on it.
Right.
And it's, especially in Laurel and Hardy. And you really see that in this film. You really see them planting gags so that the laugh is not of surprise, the laugh is of anticipation, and then the laugh is that what you thought was going to happen happens. They don't pull a switcheroo on you. It's just what you knew was going to happen. It's inevitable. And the way Richard Currier illustrated it was, he says, you see a guy who's carrying a big bunch of bundles, and then you see somebody come in and drop a banana peel on the sidewalk. He says, well, with those 2 elements in play, that this guy with the bundles is going to come in and do 108, what they called 108, which was a fall where you do a backwards somersault before you fall on your back. He says, that guy with the bundles is going to do 108 off that banana. And we always planted it so that the audience knew it before the guy did. We didn't surprise anybody with it. So you have that literally happening in From Soup to Nuts 3 times. So that's the suspension of disbelief number 1 is the dog carrying the banana peel everywhere, or Laurel and Hardy having fallen, not throwing it somewhere safe, but always just tossing it where it's likely to cause problems again, which of course it does. Now, the other major suspension of disbelief for this movie is Ollie and the Cakes. Ollie falls into a gigantic birthday celebration cake, some sort of outsized cake anyway, 3 times in this movie. Now, this movie faithfully follows the comedy rule of 3. That's well established, is that something's funny, it has a nice symmetrical balance to it. If you do it once at the beginning of the film, once in the middle, and then for your wrap-up, here it comes again, boom, there's your finale. And that's what they do in From Soup to Nuts, which doesn't really finish. There's no real finish in the movie, but that third element, that third shoe falling, if you will, is so satisfying that it works as the ending. But here's the thing: is that where is Ollie finding a shower
Yeah, in all those clothes.
He gets so much cake frosting and filling all over him when he falls. He doesn't just fall on his face. He falls full-bodied into this gigantic cake. He's got cake all over him. And you just go, where is he finding a shower and where is he finding extra suits that are so immaculate all over again 4 minutes after the last time he fell into the cake? And also, where are they getting all those cakes? I mean, I know auto freeze is there and there's a kitchen, but you can't bake a cake in 4 minutes, you know. I mean, they have, in case of, calamity, here are extra cakes, break glass in case of cake,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, it's because, of course, it's the goddamn prop man putting them there.
That's right. That's the Carl Harbaugh. The Carl Harbaugh School of Logic is that it's funny. That's why it's there. Yeah, logic be damned. It's funny. Yeah, good old Carl Harbaugh. That's a story that Frank Butler told John McCabe. And I have a beautiful 8x10 portrait of Carl Harbaugh. So whenever I look at that, I remember that quote.
And I think Charles Barr writes about that rule of three. In fact, the finishing touch, I think I mentioned that in my finishing touch blog. Ollie goes up that ramp 3 times and falls in the thing, and Edgar Kennedy gets
something on him,
three times,
and don't they do the nail gag also? Ollie swallowing the nails 3 times,
3 times. That's right.
Yeah, and you can do it as many times as you want, but don't do it any more than 3.
Yes,
and that's
right.
And unfortunately, that is a rule that Charlie Chase neglected. If you ever see a movie called Midsummer Mush, there's a gag where Charlie keeps falling. He's got a Boy Scout troop with him, and he keeps falling into a stream. Well, 3 is fine, but I think he literally falls into it 19 times in this movie.
Oh, wow.
And by the 6th time, you're going, Charlie, Uncle, we got it. Okay. And he doesn't even bother to get himself all cleaned up again before he does the fall, you see. And if you're already sopping wet, it doesn't make any, it's not funny if you're falling again. The whole point of it is that I'm clean again. And this this happens in Helpmates also. With the succession of suits, the different suits that Ollie puts on. I'm freshly showered and bathed. I'm putting on the perfume and humming. I've got my beautiful little white hat and my white slacks. And I'm coming in, now I do the trip over the carpet sweeper into the dishes and then the suit and the flour and everything else. Now I've got to go shower again. Now here's suit number 2, my standard black suit. And then I get that all wet. And so I have to go back and find whatever else I've got, which is my old Lodge Brothers suit with the scabbard and everything else,
That's right.
But that's, again, comedy rule of 3, you see.
Do you realize that this is the only suit that I've got left? It's enough to make a man burst out crying. Shut up and get this mess cleaned up. Do you know that my wife will be home at noon?
Say, what do you think I am, Cinderella? If I had any sense, I'd walk out on you.
Well, it's a good thing you haven't any sense.
It certainly is.
And the other thing as well, just talking about the banana skin and the cakes, is we were saying that they sort of telegraph the gag by showing the audience the banana skin, and then we have a twist on it in this one because Stan also sees it in advance and hides his eyes.
Yes. He's the audience's representative there, isn't he?
That's it. Yeah.
And he too falls on it, doesn't he? At one point, I think he falls, and then that's when he's behind and then does the scissors kick and everything.
I don't know if he might slip on that or he trips over the hearth. I can't remember, but he's certainly in the vicinity of the
There's something that
skin.
makes him very angry at Tiny Sanford and causes their little fracas, where Tiny pulls back, he's about to punch him and Stan just goes wham.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Kind of like he does to Harry Woods in Blockheads.
Blockheads,
Tommy Bond's father. He's about to say boom.
That's it. But that is, of course, that little segment is the bit where Stan is not Stanley.
Yeah.
if that makes sense. He's that little bit of aggro-mongerness of him.
Yeah. Still a little more aggressive than we would think later on. In fact, more so than you ever see in the previous film, in Finishing Touch.
Definitely.
It is interesting. Well, there were still these rough edges that were still yet to be refined completely, because once again, this is their eighth picture after the second 100 years. So, you can't expect them to have been entire. In fact, I don't think Laurel and Hardy were entirely fully formed until 1931 or thereabouts, really. I think sound added a lot of depth and a lot of delicacy to their characters, more so than they were able to convey in silent films, although they certainly do convey a lot of nuance and delicacy and character in silent, far more than any other comedians of that time besides maybe Chaplin or Keaton, but certainly more than the standard two-reel comedians were doing. They took one thing is they took their time. They weren't concerned about getting a laugh every 5 seconds. Their comedy did not have to be slam bang fast. It was just whatever the gag needs, we'll take the time, and character above gags. That was the emphasis.
That's a really good link, because I know this was the film where Leo McCarey sort of discovered that the pacing, the slower pacing, from reading about it, and where Ollie falls into the cake and McCarey shouts out, "Stop right there!
Yeah.
Just wait!"
Don't do anything. Let the laugh wash over you. Because they're laughing. Don't interrupt it. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a real crucial point.
If we need to tighten it, we can do that later in the editing. But let's let the footage play out. Let's let it have its time. Yeah, and not only that, but reaction shots. That was one thing that Hal Roach was very keen about. Was that he says you do the gag with Laurel and Hardy, but that didn't get the laugh so much as the reaction of Hardy, and then the reaction of Stan to the reaction of Hardy, and then the reaction back of Hardy. He said, that's what got the laugh, and that's what was human. That's what conveyed the character. Was not just what happened, but look how I feel after it happened. And don't you and Ollie saying, don't you and the audience also understand what this is like, and haven't you felt like this? Those looks to the camera are so crucial to our empathy with Laurel and Hardy, and I think it's a key reason why we love them so much, as opposed to other comedians who don't know that we're there.
Yes, absolutely.
Ollie not only knows that we're there, we're really his only friends in the world. We understand him even more than Stan does, and certainly more than any of his on-screen wives do.
Yes.
Ollie knows that we can always understand him and empathize with him. We will never not go through what he's going through, and that's absolutely of key importance to Laurel and Hardy.
Yeah, I love those looks. I don't think he does any in this particular film, but where something happens to him, or Stan points it out, and he looks to us and he nods. Yeah, that's exactly what's just happened.
Yeah, well,
after
the first time after he falls in the cake, he just sort of sits there and looks at us for a moment before he begins very slowly the messy process of scraping all of his stuff off of him, which is probably even more unpleasant than the physical fall itself was, just this goo all over you, and then he's got to pick the cake up off the floor and very embarrassedly go off back to the kitchen. I think that's his most embarrassing moment. Stan's most embarrassing moment, of course, is when he has to serve the salad undressed and misinterprets it, which of course they later reworked in A Chump at Oxford.
What kind of a joint is this?
What's the matter?
He wants me to serve the salad undressed.
Well, if he wants the salad undressed, that's the way he'll have it. Go get the salad.
I always wonder how that plays in non-English speaking countries. Is there a way to convey that that same play on words and have it mean the same thing? Because in English, dressing is goop that you put on lettuce, as well as things that you wear outside. So it works for English speaking countries, but Anyway, and it's also funny that they never do get around to serving a main course. You know, you wonder what it would have been, because they serve the fruit cocktail, they serve the soup, this rather gluey looking soup from this tureen, and you wonder how much soup they had, because Stan seems to spill most of it on Ollie's shoe. Yes, right. But they do somehow manage to get served their soup along with their fruit cocktail, and then Stan is in the middle of serving the salad when all chaos breaks loose, you see.
And now he just slaps a piece of lettuce.
Yeah, he just has a bowl of lettuce. He just, here you go. Yeah, just, yeah.
It's really good.
No really tongs in play here. No. So, yeah. Yeah, we do have, we have Sam Lufkin, we have Eleanor Vanderveer, who made a career of playing society matrons as a dress extra in scenes such as this. That's really her stock in trade. It's very rare that Eleanor Vanderveer had any dialogue, but there is an Our Gang comedy called Washy Irony, where she is the mother of a young, I think the boy's name in the film is Waldo. I'm trying to remember the name of the actor now, which is escaping me. But she has a prominent role in that, so you get to hear what she sounded like. But she was really a dress extra, and she proved to be a good actress because there was absolutely no opulence whatsoever in her personal background. She came from a poor family, and she married this crusading lawyer who was always working on the behalf of people who couldn't pay for a lawyer. So consequently, they had no money either. but they had a daughter named Barbara, and finally in 1923, Eleanor said, "I've had enough of this, a grandiose gesture of helping all these poor people. I've got to support my daughter somehow." And so she left Mr. Vanderveer. She had a friend who was working in pictures, and the friend said, "Come out to Hollywood. You're a good type. You won't be a star, but you'll work every day because they need people like you." And she says, also buy a couple of good dresses, because if you can supply your own dresses, they pay you more. Oh, right. That was always the case with extras. If you could bring your own costuming, you could pay a couple of bucks extra. So from 1920, in fact, I have a portrait shot of her from about 1923 when she was just starting out. And, they always needed dress extras like this for crowd scenes where there were well-to-do people. And that's what she did. So you can see her in Casablanca, and she's even one of the med students in Frankenstein, dressed in a white medical thing, not a fancy gown. But she worked all the time. But this is what she did basically. Once in a while, she got more to do. She's got a lot to do in Second 100 Years, and of course, she's got a wonderful bit in Battle of the Century, where she gets hit with the pie, and then and we now know that she had a title saying "Home James," and to bring it also to Anita Garvin, she's in the film A Pair of Tights, which starred Anita Garvin and Marion Byron as sort of the female Laurel Hardy. And there's a moment where Marion Byron has put 4 ice cream cones on the seat of this limousine for want of a better place to put them. And then while Marion is looking at something else, here comes Eleanor Vanderveer, the owner of the limousine, and unknowingly she sits on these 4 ice cream cones, and she has this wonderful expression where she's not quite sure what has happened, but she knows that it's not good. And then Marion Byron comes back to get the ice cream cones, and she sees this very imposing lady looking at her, staring at her, and it's like, oh dear, it's a bad moment for both of them. But Eleanor could be very, very funny. She wasn't just someone who could stand there. She understood how to play up a scene and how to make it work. She doesn't really get an opportunity to do that much in this picture, but she's the perfect person to have in this movie as one of the guests, especially because Mr. and Mrs. Culpepper are supposed to be nouveau riche, people who have just somehow come into money. I suspect that in early 1928, there were probably a lot of people that, thanks to the stock market, suddenly had these fortunes, which wouldn't last long, of course. They'd all evaporate by October of 1929. But for the moment, they were living very high on the hog. Kind of like S. Scott Fitzgerald, country boy who suddenly made it big with a couple of big novels, and now he's in Paris and doing all this stuff, and then the crash happens, and goodbye opulence. So that this is there are some Laurel and Hardy films which very much mirror their time. And I think this film and We Fall Down are the Roaring Twenties Laurel and Hardy movies. Just as One Good Turn is the Great Depression Laurel and Hardy movie.
Absolutely.
And then you might say Jitterbugs is the 1940s Laurel and Hardy picture.
Yeah, that's true.
But this From Soup to Nuts would not have been made in 1932. This is a Roaring Twenties era movie when people had money and when studios had money.
Yes.
But yeah, we should probably segue into Anita and Tiny as the Culpeppers. I don't think they ever do explain. I'm trying to remember now if they explain how they got their money, but anyway, they're newly rich anyway. It's a good thing that they plant that at the beginning of the film, because that is what sets up Anita's insecurity. She is not part of this world. This is something new. And the very first shots of the film are Tiny Sanford saying, all this highfalutin stuff is the bunk to me. I'd rather be on my front porch in my bare feet. Which gives you an idea of where they were before they came into this money for some reason.
That's right.
So so again, character is king in Hal Roach movies, and they're not just cardboard rich people. They explain that they have recently come into money. They're not used to this, and that at least as Mr. Culpepper is concerned, he doesn't want all of this opulence, whereas she does. She's a social climber. She's seeing her moment, and she wants to become part of high society, but she's not part of it, and that's why she's watching everybody else to see which spoon they pick up and which. And Anita told me this. She said, I'm watching everybody to see what they're doing, and I'm so nervous. This is my character. I don't know this world, and I'm looking out of the corner of my eye. I pick up this fork. Oh, no, that's not the right one. Okay. This one. Okay. And she says, and I was very aware of what that character would be going through.
How much direction also were you given for the famous fruit cocktail bit From Soup to Nuts?
Nothing. I would just tell what, that I'm trying to get this cherry, and I don't know what instrument to use. That was about it, and...
So you more or less just built it up?
Yeah, or you just kind of, and I'd go pick up one thing and look at somebody, see who's picking up what, and then I put it down, pick up something else, and I'm still wrong. And the thing with the cherry around the plate, and the tiara starts falling.
How did you manage to get that tiara to fall?
I think I gave my head just a little thing. It was set on there so that just a little nod, I think, would do it. I thought maybe it had a string on it, but I can't remember anybody was holding a string. I don't think so, because it wouldn't work that way.
Right.
Yeah. And Anita was just an incredible actress. She's not quite 22 when she made this movie. Can you imagine?
Right, okay.
She's so poised and so elegant and so mature, and she normally would be still a college kid nowadays. And just a magnificent, understated performance from her.
Very subtle.
I'm so glad that of all the Laurel and Hardy key supporting people, she's the one that I got to meet. Because even before I knew that she was still alive, she was always my favorite. And the reason being that she was the one who knew how to get laughs, like Jack Benny. The less you do, the funnier it is. Or even to some degree, Buster Keaton. The other Laurel and Hardy supporting players, if you think about it, are very melodramatic, theatrical, florid. You have Jimmy Finlayson with the squints and the outsized physicality. You have Edgar Kennedy, who's sort of the reverse of it in trying to hold everything in. But even so, it finally does explode. It's and then you have Charles Middleton, who's right out of a melodrama. He's got the mortgage, and he's this type of I'll get you people. He's very theatrical. Yes. And Walter Long, I'll get you guys here. He's and Richard Kramer. Everybody is, and Mae Bush. Even the women, they're all very explosive. This is also why I love George Marshall in Pack Up Your Troubles.
Yeah,
that movie is chock full of bad guys. There's just more villains in that movie than any other Laurel and Hardy picture, and yet the one who's the most effective is the one who says, "So, you couple of snitchers.
Snitches.
The next time I see you, I'll have my knife." And you just go, "Oh God, the blood ran cold." You know, he's so good in doing
he's
so
very
little.
Good.
He's more effective that way. He's more threatening that way. So just the same thing with Anita Garvin. She knew how to get a lot of laughs out of doing very little. For example, at one point where her tiara falls, when she picks it up, she's already has her eyes open and she's looking at you. She doesn't do what you would normally do, which would be, do and then look around. She just lifts it up with one move and she's already looking at you. And the elegance of the move and the symmetry of the move and the fact that she's already got her expression, that's what gets the laugh, And I asked her, I said, were you directed that way? And she said, no. She said, I just figured that, if you're on the stage, you have to act more broadly because even with front row seats, you're still people only see you as an inch tall, even if they're that close to you. She said, in the movies, you're magnified hundreds of times. She said, if it were a master shot where you see everybody head to toe and you see what's around us, I would play it a little more broadly. If it's a medium shot, I'd scale it down. And if it were a close up, all I had to do was think it and it would register. And that's what Anita Garvin does. And it's such a lovely counterpoint to all the mayhem going on around her that she does these, even though she's being frustrated beyond belief with this stupid cherry on top of the fruit cocktail, which, and by the way, it's very interesting to compare that bit of the gag or that element of the gag, that working of the gag, to the way that Stan does it a few pictures earlier in the second 100 years. Now, when Stan does it, he goes from guest to guest to guest, chasing the cherry, and practically clambers on top of the table and, really plays it for all it's worth. I think Anita actually gets even more mileage out of it just keeping to herself, I also love the moment where Stan is looking at her frustration and he says, just a moment. And Stan actually gets a very good idea where he takes a glass and upends the fruit cocktail and boom, there comes the cherry. And he says, see, here you are. And then Anita does this wonderful reaction like, why didn't I think of that? It's a beautiful, beautiful moment. She just says, thank you so much. And it warms her character up so much. She's not an ogre. She may be the social climber, but she's a nice person underneath it, and that's right. A little moment that really conveys that. And then of course she's about to, slurp the cherry up from the glass, and Stan slaps her on the back and the tiara goes down and she drops the glass and it spills out onto the table again. So she's back to square one. So, and that too, think about how she had to work with props. A lot of comedians don't work well with props. A lot of comedians, stand-up comedians, started to smoke cigars because they didn't know what to do with their hands. So physicality does not always come easy to people who want to be funny. But she works brilliantly with them, and she's basically what she's got to work with is a spoon and a fruit cocktail, and okay, Anita, be funny, and. Boy, is she, So just a magnificent. And I asked her about the tiara. She said, I said, was there a wire on there or something? She said, no. I was able to position it so that I knew, how far I had to shake my head to make it fall over my eyes. So that too, that's something else that's intuitive, It's
perfectly done. Yeah, perfectly done.
Anyway, she was brilliant, and I'm so glad that I got to meet her in, I think it was 1978 was when I met her. And
okay, tell us about that. Yeah, tell us how did you actually first come to meet?
Well,
Anita?
I don't know how Bob Satterfield got an address for her. She was married to a guy named Clifford Red Stanley, who back in the 1920s had been a star trombonist, singer, and eccentric dancer with a dance band called Irving Aronson and his Commanders. about whom I have written at length. There will be four CDs coming out on them, two of which are already out. One is about to come out, and I've written the booklet notes for them all. And Clifford was a key part of that band. Because they did a floor show, and they were a full contained unit. They weren't just a band. They did comedy as well, and he was a key member of this band. They got married in Anita and Red got married in 1930, which is why her film career kind of tapers off after that. She wanted to be I wanted to be an old married lady, but Stan kept calling me back. Anyway. Anita had been in pictures for several years before this. She had worked actually with Stan when he was doing the pictures with Joe Rock. She was in one called The Sleuth, and she was supposed to be in one called The Snowhawk. There's a still of her with him in that, even though she doesn't have any footage in what survives. She made pictures of all sorts of people. She made a film with Greta Garbo. She was quite a busy actress, and had her own series for a while. They only made 3 pictures, but they're all very good. Anita and Marion Byron as a sort of a female Laurel Hardy, particularly A Pair of Tights. And that's another film where she has a wonderful moment, basically doing nothing, where Edgar Kennedy and Stuart Irwin have come over to be the girls' dates, and so Edgar Kennedy is sitting there very awkwardly next to Anita, and she's just looking at him, just staring at him, and he's getting more and more flustered and nervous as she does nothing but just look at him, and Edgar, because they don't know each other, and finally Edgar turns to her and says, "Well, how are you?" And she says, "Hungry." So they go on their big date at an ice cream parlor, and by the way, Laurel and Hardy were supposed to be in that movie, and in fact were in that movie. They actually did shoot footage for it, but as written in the script, they sort of commandeered the whole story and took the emphasis away from the girls. And so it's really a better thing that they weren't in the picture, but it would be nice to have the footage. I wish that survived. Anyway, Anita was an accomplished comedian, even at this early age of, not quite 22 when she made From Soup to Nuts. And so I got to meet her because Bob Satterfield somehow came into contact with Clifford Red Stanley and Anita Garvin Stanley and invited, I guess he didn't know that Red was still alive, because he wrote to Anita, and as Anita said, she invited me to a banquet, a Sons of the Desert banquet, and the letter said, "If there is a Mr. Stanley, he is welcome too." And she said, that's what got me to come out, because she had really been a mystery figure for many, many years. Nobody knew where she was. And so around 1978, she came to a Sons of the Desert meeting, and somehow my friend Jordan R. Young also found out where she was and asked if he could do an interview with her for the Los Angeles Times. And so she said, "Well, okay." And so I drove. I said, I want to be there for this, So I have snapshots, beautiful color snapshots from our first meeting. They lived in Camarillo, which was quite a bit north of us. It's about 100 miles north of us. They had a nice mobile home, basically not a trailer, but a modular home. She and Red, and this was fall of 1978. She was adorable. She answered all of our questions. And she's still instantly recognizable. She at that time was wearing her hair in sort of a Louise Brooks style, or Colleen Moore, except it was beautiful silver hair now, but facially just instantly recognizable as Anita. She hadn't changed a bit. And so we began a friendship from that point on, and she began coming regularly to Sons of the Desert functions. She even came out to my little tent in Orange County, and she insisted on driving herself. This is after Red had passed away. Red died in the spring of 1980. So he was only alive for about a year and a half after we first met them. And I really wish I had done an in-depth interview with him, but because I would have had many things to ask him too. But he was very deferential. He would just say, "Well, I'm going to go read in my room. You guys have fun," and and of course we hadn't interviewed Anita yet first either, and so she was of paramount importance to us. So that's why I never really got read, unfortunately. But when she was going to do our meeting in Orange County, I said, "Well, I'll come to Camarillo and get you." And she said, "No, I'll drive." I said, "If it's 100 miles each way," no problem. So she drove her little red Honda Civic out to Orange County, and we did put her up at a nice hotel. We did do that for her overnight, and we bought her meals, but she was very generous to fans and very, enjoyed being rediscovered. And I think the Sons of the Desert really gave her a new lease on life, because that came into her life, a year and a half before Red died, and that really hit her hard. There would be times when I would call her up just to check in on her, and I could tell she'd been crying, and she'd say, "I'm sorry, I was just having a little pity party."
She seemed like such a lovely lady. I mean, from the little video clips that are on the definitive restoration set, that is a little Super 8.
Yeah, I'm sorry that my focus wasn't better there, but I got what I got.
No. Yeah, it was lovely, but I could have watched that forever. It just, you wanted to just go on and on.
Well,
listening to her stories is just fascinating.
If we had the technology then that we have today, where you can take a phone and just keep going and going and going, Super 8 film was $4 a roll plus another $6 to get it developed. So that's $10 per 3 minutes. And I was a starving college student, so I could only afford about three or four rolls of film for her. So you got what you got, what you could afford, and film was not erasable. Once it was exposed, that was it. So if we had videotape or if we had digital, yes, I would have hours and hours of them. I do have a lot of hours of audio tape of her talking about her career. So I do have at least audio. And I keep thinking that maybe someday I'll put together an audio documentary.
That'd be lovely.
It won't be the entire Magic Behind the Movies book. That would be taxing to me and to anybody listening. But I think I think there might be something where it would be a succession of chapters devoted to each of these people and have them. I would help it along and do narration, but you'd basically be hearing them tell their story because I have the audio of them, So
the Skretvedt tapes.
Yeah, really.
That'd be great.
Well, the raw material is here for it to be done.
Sounds amazing.
But she stayed in Sons of the Desert for many years until she passed away in 1994. She wasn't able as much in her later years to get around because she had a bad heart attack at one point. She had moved from Camarillo to an apartment, and it was a 2-story apartment, and she had a heart attack and then was never able to get up the stairs again. So after that point, she went to the Motion Picture Home in Woodland Hills, and she was there probably for the last 5 or 6 years of her life. And but that was very good for her because she lived near several people that she'd known in the business, and so she was able to establish old ties again. Charles Lamont was somebody who had been a friend back in the olden days. He was a comedy director, so I and a friend of ours named Steve Randisi would often come and visit her there and have lunch with her. She was still very lively, and still, if she was physically frail, she was still very boisterous in terms of her personality, and loved to tell stories. And then as Richard Band says in his commentary for Battle of the Century that's on the definitive restoration set over the footage of Leo the lion roaring, he says, "Now if Anita Garvin were here today, and I wish she were, she would be saying, 'Same to you, fella.'" So she did have that sense of humor. She was not a shrinking violet, and she was happy to participate in on stage functions at Sons of the Desert banquets and conventions and things. She still had that much of a need to perform. If you're that determined, she was 11 years old when she was a Ziegfeld showgirl.
Yes.
That's someone who's very determined to get somewhere in the world and who wants to be on the stage. Well, that doesn't entirely go away with old age, So So anyway, she was a delight to know, and I knew her from 1978 until she passed away in 1994, and she's just a cherished memory to me. And I'm glad that I do have letters and photographs and audio tape of her in whatever film I have. So,
yeah, that's lovely. That's really nice. Nice memories to have. What's your favourite film with Anita in, Randy?
Oh, well...
Or what do you think she's best in, let's say?
This is a wonderful film. It's probably the one that's the best showcase for her, but the next one would be Blotto.
Yes,
I mean, she's just magnificent in that. She, as brilliant as Laurel and Hardy are with their laughing, once again, she is the understated counterpoint to whatever that's big and chaotic that's going on. You go to Anita, who's just doing very little, but you know that she's smoldering and you know what's going on inside of her. And that gets an even bigger laugh, the fact that she's not shrieking, going, "What are you doing?" And all that.
Yes.
She's just going, "What I'm going to do to you."
And she's tapping her fingers on that gun.
Yeah, she's tapping her fingers. She's just looking and looking. And she says, "Weren't they brilliant?" She says, "It was all I could do to keep from laughing while they were doing that."
I bet.
And the other thing about that film too is when you look at the foreign language versions, it's new footage of them doing that routine again. It's not the same footage, and they're just as brilliant in other performances, but it proves that it was a performance.
Yes.
So it proves that Laurel and Hardy were brilliant actors too, along with Anita Garvin. Yeah, no, I love her little moment with Jean de Briac, the proprietor of the gun shop, and she says, "How much is that big gun?" And he says, "Oh, the one with the double barrels." She says, "And I want a box of bullets too."
She knocks somebody over on the way out, doesn't she, as well?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Drive us anywhere, any place. And Charlie Hall has the big handlebar mustache and the top hat, like he's a cabbie in Victorian London, in this taxi. And she knocks a guy over as she's barreling out of the nightclub. Yeah, the Rainbow Club. Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah, there's wonderful little touches like that. And again, she found ways to imbue her character with something that made it more than what it would have been on paper or what it would have been with any other actress. You know?
Yeah. A good one is Why Girls Love Sailors, the first.
Oh yes,
film
yeah. We never even knew she was in it, and she's very prominent in it. Yeah.
And that seething look with that face at the porthole.
Yes.
And then this blunderbuss comes out. Fabulous.
Right, and she's very good in Sailors Beware. As the jewel thief. Yeah. A lot of her films are not as well known as they ought to be because she did a lot very early on. She also did a lot of work with Charlie Chase. And she said, "Charlie Chase always put me in a blonde wig for some reason. He liked me better as a blonde." So that was her key memory of him. But yeah, she very talented actress and talented beyond her years because she's very young. And you wouldn't think that she would have that kind of intuition about how to play comedy. But, again, she'd already been in the business for 5 or 6 years before she came to Laurel and Hardy. So, there's
it's just unbelievable. That we're talking about these absolutely classic films and classic moments, and you're there sitting talking to the person that was in the films with the boys, talking about them, laugh. Just unbelievable. I can't get my head around it. It's just wonderful.
I would have times when I could feel my head spinning. One in particular was Felix Knight, who played Tom Tom in Babes in Toyland. Now, I never physically met him because he was in New York, and I'm out here in Southern California. But I did a phone interview with him, and I called him. I was a timid kid. I was a timid college kid, and I hated cold calling these people, these show business veterans who didn't need a 20-year-old kid asking them about what they'd done 50 years earlier, But as it turns out, most of them were flattered that a 20-year-old kid was interested in what they'd done 50 years earlier. But anyway, I was going to call Felix Knight to set up an interview. And just in case I had my questions at the ready, in case he said, "Let's do it now." Well, I called him. I said, "Mr. Knight, my name is Randy Skretvedt. I'm working on a research project about Laurel and Hardy. And if you have time at some point in the near future, I'd love to talk to you about your work in Babes in Toyland." He says, "Well, I'm just watching a ball game. We can do it now." Okay, well, good thing I had my questions, But the
That's
thing
it,
was,
yeah.
he was a vocal coach, and he knew how to take care of his voice. And his voice sounded exactly as it did as Tom Tom in 1934. Now, I'm talking to him in 1980, and he sounded, I was talking to, I wasn't seeing him. So the mental image I have is Tom Tom Piper. And he sounds just like, it's not some old man talking about what I did 50 years earlier. It's, yes, I did the film in 1934. I'm going, God, I'm talking to Tom Tom, I feel like Charlotte Henry, what's going on here?
Oh, he'd have to be most unusual, energetic, resourceful, and with any amount of patience. A fella sort of, like me.
So there were those moments, where you really had to it was just amazing. I don't know if you've ever seen the documentary series Hollywood that Kevin Brownlow did about the silent era.
Yeah, a long time ago, but yes.
Yeah, I mean, he got some amazing interviews, and those were all done in 1977. I have some going back a little farther than that, but there's one in particular with Blanche Sweet. Now, Blanche Sweet started very early in the picture business. She's only about 12 or 14 years old when she made a picture called The Battle of Elderbrush Gulch, I think, with D.W. Griffith in 1912. But here she is in 1977, and she's talking just like this. She's not encumbered by age at all. She's just perfectly fine, and she's talking about 1912. When Mr. Griffith was there with Billy Bitzer, we were doing this back in the, like, this is 65 years ago that she's talking about, and she's talking as if it happened yesterday. Once in a while you would get really lucky like that. Not always. Sometimes you get people say, oh, that was all so long ago. I learned to always take pictures with me if I were going to see somebody physically. Always take pictures or any visual cues, because then they go, oh yeah, now I remember this guy was so and so and so and so, and it would prompt stories. So, but I never had to do that with Anita, though. She always had a very, very clear memory of, and these are things that she never saw. You have to remember, she was busy either going to the next picture or afterwards she was raising her kids. A lot of the films that she made with Laurel Hardy, she didn't see until she was in Sons of the Desert.
Good grief. That's incredible.
And she told me, she said, they never let us go to the previews. They never let actors go to the previews for the reason being that if any of our footage had to be cut out, they didn't want our feelings to be hurt. If we didn't go over, it would be cut out, but they didn't want us to know about it. And she said, I did look at the dailies, and she said, I remember when talkies were coming in, I was doing a picture with Clark and McCullough at Fox, and it was my first sound film. And she said, I'm wondering, how am I going to sound? I have no idea. And she says, the sound comes on and I'm talking and I'm lisping all over the place. Every sound, lisping, everything is lisp. I thought, oh my God, my whole career, everything is going to go down the drain. But she said, but then the next actor came on, and he too was lisp, and everything was lisp. And I went, oh, phew. And she said, I realized it was the sound recording and it wasn't me. But she said, but for a few moments there, I could see everything I'd worked for just going right down the tubes, So that was her first initial experience with talkies. I also remember her talking about Henry Ginsberg, who was installed by the Bank of America to oversee or to speed up the production and to minimize costs at the Hal Roach Studios. This is in 1931. Yes. And she said, Stan called him the expediter. Yes. And she said, Laurel and Hardy did not like somebody telling them to rush things along. They wanted to get it right. They didn't take an inordinate amount of time. As you know, Stan Laurel liked to get things the first time because he liked the magic of the first take. He thought there was a spontaneity to the first time that you wouldn't get in subsequent takes. But Henry Ginsberg just wanted it, I don't want a good, I want a Tuesday. And so she said, so whenever he would come down to the set, Stan would slow everything way down until Ginsberg would get the message and leave. So that was his way of being passively aggressive toward Henry Ginsburg. She remembered that very well. And she also remembered, she said, when you played a scene with Laurel and Hardy, you didn't have to, really, there wouldn't be, your dialogue generally wouldn't be written out anyway. You would get the gist of the scene, and you would just do it, just understanding what you had to convey in that shot. Basically we're coming up with our own dialogue for the most part. It's not written down. And it's true, when you see the scripts, they're more like what we would now call treatments. Only in very specific instances do they ever show the dialogue. Otherwise, it's, Anita gets over that she wants to go to Atlantic City, it's up to you to get it over, but that's what the script wants. And you'll say it better than I will write it, is basically the attitude. So she said, the other comedy lots were very nice, but the Roach Studio was special. And she said, it had a warmth and a family atmosphere. And it was, the other places were fun, but the Roach Studio was really, really special. And she says, I can't tell you the fond memories that I have of that place. It was just such a joy to work there. So,
that's
she retained that for the rest of her days.
Yes. So it was a lot of fun.
Yep.
Yeah. Fantastic.
Well, I think we probably covered it from soup to nuts.
I think we did. I think we've gone from soup to nuts. Yeah, absolutely.
And a big gooey cake for dessert on the side.
or three.
Yes, there we go.
Brilliant. That's brilliant. Randy, thank you ever so much for spending this time with us again. It's been wonderful. I have you down for wrong again. I've got you down for early to bed.
All right.
But I'm sure we'll be in touch before that, because I can't leave you alone for too long. So there's so much wonderful.
I can talk your ear off on virtually any film. So
fabulous.
The next time you need some hearing loss, you let me know and I'll contribute to it. So,
not at all. To be honest, I forget I'm doing an interview when I'm talking to you, because I'm just in a different world. It's just wonderful. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity. I appreciate it.
No problem at all. And we'll see you again soon, Randy. Thank you so much.
What do you think of it?
It's very nice. Brief and right to the point.
And there we have it, From Soup to Nuts, a great little comedy short. It's fascinating to hear Randy's thoughts on this picture, and I want to say a huge thank you to Randy for allowing us to include that small segment of his telephone interview with Anita. It's always a pleasure and an honour to have these stories told by the people that were there at the time on the blogcast. So to hear Anita telling us in her own words about her part in the film is an absolute treat.
Well, that certainly is big of you.
And so that brings episode 16 to a tidy close. I hope you enjoyed today's discussion. Do get in touch on the Laurel and Hardy blog Facebook page or in our Blogheads Facebook group, and let me know what you thought of this episode, and indeed what you like or dislike about From Soup to Nuts. Thank you, as always, to the ever-entertaining Randy Skretvedt and to the Bohunks Orchestra, of course, for the wonderful music. Don't forget you can find affiliate links to purchase CDs of the Bohunks music and copies of Randy's books in the podcast show notes and also on the shop page of the Laurel and Hardy blog website too. And finally, 1,000 thanks to you for listening and supporting the blogcast and the Laurel and Hardy blog in general. I can't tell you how much it means to be able to share my love for the boys with you and to hear how much you're enjoying our time together too. Your homework for next time, should you choose to accept it, is to watch the silent short You're Darn Tootin', as our attention in episode 17 will be focused on that brilliant two-reeler. So until next time, stay in touch, stay safe, and keep laughing. And until then, it's goodbye from him.
Goodbye.
Goodbye from him.
Goodbye.
It's goodbye from her.
Goodbye, Stanley. Goodbye, Mr. Hardy.
And it's goodbye from me. Goodbye.